Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to work on reading comprehension, specifically looking back in the text to find key details and then summarizing or finding the main idea. Okay, so the title of this book is Robots and Museums, written by Vanessa Ritchie, illustrated by Magdalena Wolarska. Chapter 1. Jason loved to build robots. He loved talking to his robots too, but he was not as good at talking to other students. Still, when the school announced they were starting a robotics club, Jason was excited to go. When the club started that Tuesday afternoon, Jason sat quietly in the back. He listened intently as the science teacher, Mr. Kenton, talked about the robotics club. When the teacher finished, the students got to look at some of the robots he had made. Mr. Kenton demonstrated how one of them worked. After the demonstration, the kids gathered around the robot kits. These kits held all of the contents to build their robots. They even got to take the kits home. Before dismissing the club, Mr. Kenton told them about a competition at the end of the year. The students would split into pairs and make a robot. The robot would have to complete an obstacle course. The robot that could do all 10 tasks the fastest would win. At the next club meeting, Mr. Kenton watched the students. They were chatting and picking through the pieces in their kits. One boy stood off by himself and seemed to be working intently. Chapter 2. For this work session, the kids were free to work as they wanted. This allowed them to get a better feel for all of the robot parts. While the students talked and played with the pieces, Mr. Kenton went and watched the boy. He had already completed a basic model. So there's Mr. Kenton and there's the boy. That's quite an impressive looking robot, Mr. Kenton said. Jason was so surprised that he dropped the robot. It broke on the table, scattering everywhere. Thanks, Jason stammered. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. They both started collecting the pieces. It looks like this is not the first time you've built a robot, Mr. Kenton said. Jason shook his head. Looking down at Jason's name tag, he asked, "How long have you been working with robots, Jason?" "I've been building robots ever since I stopped trying to eat my toys. So I was about 3 or 4 years old." Mr. Kenton laughed. "That's a long time." Jason smiled. Without thinking, he had already started a new robot. This time he was building a robot with wheels. "It looks like you don't even need to think about what you are building," Mr. Kenton mentioned. "Robots kind of build themselves," Jason said, and shrugged. Mr. Kenton laughed again. "That's certainly not how my robots happen. Would you like to stay after Robotics Club ends, and we can talk about the competition?" Jason's eyes brightened. That would be awesome. Chapter 3. For the next few months, Jason worked diligently on a new robot. Jason looked forward to Tuesdays. He was so eager building his new robot that he forgot to be scared of talking to the other students. In fact, he started making friends. One of the kids named Carl was remarkably quick at programming a robot. As the competition got closer, the clubs started to pair off to make their robots. Carl and Jason became a team. With only a couple of weeks left until the competition, the clubs started to try out their robots. Mr. Kenton had even made an obstacle course. Jason and Carl were able to complete 3 out of the 6 tasks with their robot the first time they tried. They still had some work to do, so Jason asked Mr. Kenton if they could work on it over the weekend. Sure, Mr. Kenton replied. Let's all meet at the library so you can keep working on the robot there. Jason and Carl were ecstatic. They felt they might really have a chance to win the competition. The day of the competition arrived, and Jason woke up with butterflies in his stomach. He was not able to eat the big pancake breakfast his mother made. Soon his parents were parking the car and taking him into the local museum where the competition was held. Chapter 4. As Jason approached the door, he saw Carl and his mother walking into the museum at the same time. Carl looked as nervous as Jason felt. Their parents headed into the gymnasium. Carl and Jason went to the cafeteria where the competitors were meeting. So there's Carl and there's Jason, and this must be their robot. Mr. Kenton stood in front of the kids and gave them a pep talk. Remember, this is about having fun more than anything else. It would be great if one of our teams won. But even if we don't win, we can learn a lot from the other students' robots. He then showed them the roster for the competition. Jason and Carl looked for their names and found themselves at the very bottom of the list. They would have to wait 45 minutes before their competition. After waiting and watching the other robots, it was finally Jason and Carl's turn. They took a deep breath and began the program. They completed the first and second tasks in less than 30 seconds. Feeling more confident, Jason smiled. By the end of the obstacle course, both Jason and Carl were beaming. They had finished all 10 tasks. Although they were excited to see if they won the competition, they were thrilled that they had finished. Jason turned to his new friend and gave him a high five. Okay, now we're going to get to the questions. So we'll read the question and then we'll go back and find where we found the answer to that question. This says, why did Jason's robot break? Is it Jason broke it because he was frustrated? It fell apart during the competition? Jason dropped it because he was startled. So I went back in the text and I'm on page 8 here. And I read this part right here. Jason was so surprised that he dropped the robot. It broke on the table, scattering everywhere. So that gives me the answer to that question. So why did Jason's robot break? I chose this answer. Jason dropped it because he was startled. So I filled in the answer right here. So the next question is, what is a major theme of this story? Is it robots are cool? You can gain confidence by doing what you love? Winning is the most important thing. So first let's talk about theme. Theme is kind of like main idea, like why did the author write this? Or how does this make you feel? Or what is the lesson? So I'm going to choose this one. You can gain confidence by doing what you love. I chose this because working with robots made Jason confident enough to make new friends. So he felt really good about what he could do to make robots. And he also made a new friend because he was so comfortable. He made his new friend Carl. Next question. Which word best describes Mr. Kenton? Is it encouraging, nervous, or mean? So I looked back in the text at this page 10, and I think the answer is encouraging because it says right here, this is Mr. Kenton talking. It looks like you don't even need to think about what you are building. So I chose encouraging for that answer, and I gave that one example. There are various examples of Mr. Kenton being encouraging to the students and especially to Jason. So read this sentence from the story. The day of the competition arrived, and Jason woke up with butterflies in his stomach. In this sentence, the phrase butterflies in his stomach most likely means which of the following? So this is what we're looking for. Butterflies in his stomach. You might have heard this before. Does it mean he had insects in his belly? Probably not. Does it mean Jason felt very nervous or scared? It could be that. Does it mean Jason had a stomach ache? It could be that. So butterflies in your stomach actually means Jason felt nervous or scared. If you have butterflies in your stomach, kind of like a nervous stomach. I'm sure you've all felt that before. So in chapter 2, Mr. Kenton startles Jason. What happens to Jason's robots right after? So this is where we're going to look for key details. The choices are it bounces off the floor unharmed. Jason drops the robot and it breaks. The robot starts moving and talking. So let's take a look back in our text. So I went back to that same part of chapter 2 on page 8. And it says, Jason was so surprised that he dropped the robot. It broke on the table, scattering everywhere. So that answers my questions. If I had a highlighter, I would highlight it. But I'll just do this. Jason was so surprised, he dropped the robot. It broke on the table, scattering everywhere. So that's the evidence of that key detail, that question about key details. So let's go back to our question and fill in the answer. So again, the question is in chapter 2, Mr. Kenton startles Jason. What happens to Jason's robots right after? It bounces off the floor unharmed. No, we know that it breaks. Jason drops the robot and it breaks. So that's what happened right after it breaks. So I'm going to fill in the answer to this one right here. Okay. The next question is, who is the narrator of this story? The narrator is the person who's telling the story or from whose point of view. Is Jason telling the story? Is it Mr. Kenton? Or is it a third-person narrator? Okay, so this is a think about it question. This is not when you're going to find evidence in the story. So you have to think about who is narrating the story. The correct answer is a third-person narrator. And a third-person narrator uses pronouns like he, she, or they. They're called third-person pronouns. So it's a third-person narrator. And that would be instead of you, they, or I. So if Jason was telling the story, he would use I felt this way. Same with Mr. Kenton. Okay, now you need to use your visual clues to answer this question. Based on the illustration, which of the following could you guess about Jason and Carl's robot? So it's made out of silver, it's dangerous, or they use a remote to operate it. Take a look. Look at this right here. So the correct answer is they use a remote to operate it. And I used the picture to find that remote. I don't think it's made out of silver because it's not a silver color, it's gold. And it doesn't really look dangerous, so they used a remote to operate it is the best answer to that question. Sometimes it's not the answer that you were thinking of, but sometimes you have to choose the best answer. Okay, so I hope that was helpful to you guys, and I'll see you next time. Take care and stay safe.